What's up, guys? We're going over Constructor today. We're going to create this in a separate class. I already have Netbeans open, so we'll go ahead and create a new project. Java application. Let's call this Construct. If I can spell Constructor. And we'll go ahead and create our class that we're going to create the constructor in. So let's right click on source packages, go new. And let's create the Java main class first. So we're going to create the main class. We're just going to call this main. And here's all the logical stuff we're going to do. Create some space. And now we're going to create the class that we want to create that constructor in, okay? So for us, it's going to be car. So we'll go to new Java class. We'll call it car. Finish. So a class is what, guys? It defines an object, right? It's a blueprint of an object is what we say. So for every object that we create, it's going to have certain variables and functions that we define in this car class. So to initialize that object, we need to create one thing, and that one thing is called the constructor. We have a default constructor and a parameterized constructor is what the book language is. Java gives you a default constructor automatically if you don't create one. And basically what that looks like is just a constructor with no, or a function with no parameters. But for this case, we're gonna have a constructor that initializes this car to have certain attributes. So to get started, we need to define what a car has. So for us, a car has wheels. Maybe it has a model, right? Has a year. And we'll say it has a miles. How many miles is on that car, right? So for the constructor, it's gonna be the same name as the class with no return type. So we're gonna type in public car, boom, like that. So that is gonna be our constructor. Now that is right there is what we call a default constructor. It basically lets you initialize the object with no variables or anything assigned. So for us, we want to pass in certain parameters that we want to assign that values to the car. So for us, we want to assign all these values, but in the future, you don't have to have all the variables that you create within the car class. You could just have miles and years if you wanted to, but for us, we're gonna have 4. So we're gonna have the wheels first. We're gonna have the model. We're gonna have the year, and we're gonna have the miles. And we're gonna call that miles. So this next part's gonna be a little confusing, but just hang with me a little second. We're gonna use a keyword called this, and you're gonna see this in your first classes or in the first books you read. So this, let's type in the first one just so we can talk about it. This wheels equals W. So what we're doing is we're referencing wheels, this wheels, and we're assigning it to the value that's passed in that constructor. So all this does is say this class. So the class that we're currently in, grab that variable, and that's what we're going to use. W is, of course, the parameter passed. We usually name the W wheels, model, year, and miles, but for confusing purposes, I did it like that. And you can name them whatever you want. So we'll do the same thing for all the other variables. This dot model equals M. This dot was a year equals Y, and this dot miles equals miles. Cool. This is actually the only thing we need to do inside the car class, which is pretty awesome. It's very simple. So once again, this is going to initialize the object and give it certain values that we passed in and allow us to get these values. So we'll move to the main, and this is where we're going to do all the logical stuff. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create an instance or an object. Those are the same words there. When I say instance of a class or an object of a class, it's the same thing. So we're going to create an object, which is going to be called car. So we're going to call that car class. And we're going to say that Mustang equals new car. So you're going to get red squiggly lines, and that is because we're not giving the value. So we're calling this function, but we're not passing in the values we want to assign it to. So this is important. We have to remember what values come first. So we know that the integer wheels comes first, then the model, then the year, then the miles. So how many wheels does a car have? Well, hopefully ours has 4, of course, and then we go model, year, then miles. So we'll go model, and we'll pass in GT. It's definitely not a Mustang model, but we're gonna go with it. The year is, we'll say 1970. And of course the miles. How many miles does it have on? Well, it's 1970, so we'll say it has 100,000 miles on it. Cool. It's showing regular squiggly lines because I'm used to doing JavaScript. So we'll pass in 1970 right there. Okay, cool. Now we can use these values for a certain object named Mustang. So if we wanted to use the value maybe 100,000, we can say Mustang dot, and when you type in dot, you can see the values that we assigned it to. So we have the miles, 100,000, we have the year, we have the wheels, and we have the model. So if we want to see how many miles it has on it, we can just say miles and print that out. And when we run it, it will say 100,000. Cool, and this goes for everything, guys. So if we can say system out, if you don't know what I'm doing here, I'm just typing S out and hitting tab, and that will pop up. We can say, what's the year of this car? And we can run it, and it should print out 1970. Cool. So that is basically what a constructor does. We'll go into more depth of how to really use that, and we can expand on what we can do with that. So we're going to create another object called Camaro, and we're going to assign values that the user picks. So for this, we're going to need a scanner class equals new scanner, and we can say system.in, and we need to ask the user, say, hey, not literally hey, what is the miles on it, right? And we'll say we need a double to keep track of those miles. And we say miles equals scanner.next double. And that's showing regular squiggly lines. We just need to add that import. Awesome. So now the user has the ability to control how many miles it has on it. So let's say you're creating a database for a car dealership, and we know that the car is going to be a Camaro, and we say new car, and we know the database always knows it's going to have 4 cars, right? And the one we gave out, well, that's an SRT. And the year, well, we always know that the year is never going to change. It's a 2000 model, right? But what the system doesn't know is how many miles does a car have when it gets back. So now we can pass in miles, and we can do that. So now the user has the ability to control how many miles it has on it. So when we system.out, we can say the Camaro has, and we can say the Camaro dot miles, and we can do that. Awesome. So now if we run that, and we can say the Camaro has 50 miles on it, which is highly unlikely, but could happen. Now the Camaro has 50 miles. So that's another thing with the constructor. You don't have to pass it, values that, the programmer wants. You can say that the user wants to assign these values, and you can do that as well. So that is essentially what a constructor does. And notice how we have 2 objects, but we have 2 different variables for everything. So once again, a constructor initializes an object to its own attributes. So how many ever objects you have, you always have that one class, but you'll have many blueprints of that class. So in this case, we have one car class, our one car object, that is Mustang and has these attributes. And then here we have a Camaro that has these attributes. So just remember, you can have many objects to one class. That's always the confusing part. The The constructor is definitely one of the most confusing things I learned, and once you understand how that works and what that does to the class, you will start to understand more about how the class works and the overall how the mapping of everything and how it works. If that makes any sense. Thanks, guys. If you have any questions, please post in the comments or email me. If you don't understand this or I could explain it in a better way and you're watching it, then please let me know. Always trying to improve the videos. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.